Thank you so much, gentlemen.
I've been glad to be here.
Extremely excited about this podcast, and I think the world's very excited to learn more about Mysten and Sui and what you guys are building here. So I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Awesome. I think maybe I was kind of doing a little deep dive on each of your research or each of your backgrounds, and wanted to start maybe just from like how you got like red pilled in the crypto world. I think everybody's kind of background is a little bit unique. I know that you were past at VMware, and then also at Libra and Meta, you were the director of programming languages. Is that correct?
No, so at Meta, I started out as director of programming language and runtime.
Okay.
Novi, I was responsible for both the developer platform as well as the research.
Okay, perfect. Well, maybe just starting off from that, like just a little bit about each of yourselves, and then we can go more into depth on Sui and like what you're building here at Mysten.
Sure.
Yeah, I've been in tech for now 26 years. Started out as a software engineer. Just it's hard to think as recent as 10 years ago, I won the ACM Software System Award. That's the very, very prestigious award for like only the pioneers in the industry. Mark Andreessen was a winner for a prior year. My thing, when I was at Apple and later on at Facebook, has always been the one that pushed on the boundary of technology. If you ask wrong, like really, really hard stuff, on the software side, on the system side, often people come to me, my team to build this kind of thing. So to me, getting red pilled into crypto is sort of like, kind of destined.
Yeah.
It is the combination of a lot of different technical area that I have interest in. It's really fascinating to add distributed system cryptography, programming language, and kind of adding a little bit of economics on top of it. So I was really, really fascinated by it once I had a chance to dig into it. Start working a little bit with a few different projects in crypto right around 17, 18 kind of time frame. Got really excited, but also recognized there's a massive potential in terms kind of addressing the gap between where the vision, where are we going to go with this, and the reality of the technology. Exactly. It was extremely primitive back then. So I thought about, hey, maybe I should do something there. I sort of like planted a seed in my head. Like I want to do something in this space. So when the Libra project, kind of stopped, people stopped whispering about it inside Facebook, it was obvious for me to join that because I knew, given how early the industry is, this is probably what my best bet to be able to build that kind of all-star teams to bring all these experts together. And that's sort of kind of prepared me down this journey, kind of building our team, building all this technology, kind of learn a few things, thinking pretty hard about, hey, what would it take for this to become mainstream? What's on the problem we're going to solve? Met great people along the way, and that sort of is the sort of leading us to Mysten.
Wonderful. No, I think I very much kind of appreciate the work that you're doing at Libra, and at the time, I think everybody in the crypto industry was very scared that Libra was going to launch and just take over the entire industry. And so I think there's, tremendous learnings from that standpoint, but I'm very much of a fan of any blockchain or ecosystem that is trying to bring on more users. I would argue it's still very kind of in the rudimentary phases today. So I'm excited for what you guys were building. And then on your side.
So I started as a software engineer as well. I did not win an ACM award. But I started building risk management and trading systems for hedge funds and investment banks. In 2011, I found out about Bitcoin. I got instant red pill after looking at the code. I thought it was amazing.
Did you buy any?
I started mining Bitcoin actually. I was buying Bitcoin around like $25, I believe, or even less. I wish I kept them all. But I started mining Bitcoin personally until I realized most people didn't know how to do it. So I built a Bitcoin mining company very, very quickly, launched that until 2012. And after I kind of was done with that, I went on to launch enterprise blockchain for Oracle and VMware. I thought, the next element of technology is taking it to companies, but realizing that actually companies create even more problems once you start to centralize these systems. And I was looking for an opportunity to do something at a large scale because I believe that technology fundamentally belonged to the people. And to do it at scale, infrastructure was where the problems were at. And hearing about the problems Libra was aiming to solve, I got really, really interested. And I joined the Facebook team. I led a lot of the work we did in the R&D team. I worked with Evan. I was instantly interested in all the hard problems on infrastructure. I was not interested in wallets and things like that. I wanted to deal with the more complex side of crypto. Met really great friends who are now co-founders along with me in Mysten. And we have a blast building really intelligent systems.
That's awesome. Amazing. No, I think they're wonderful backgrounds, and I'm very excited for what you guys are building. So maybe to jump off, how was kind of the transition from Libra into what you are now building with Sui and at Mysten Labs? And what would you kind of say? Maybe just start from there, and then we can start to parse apart from there.
Yeah, the reason why I was very excited about the Libra mission, just kind of going back a little bit, right? Everybody recognizes opportunity here, right? If you think purely from the infrastructure side, what was Libra trying to solve, right? So we recognize, internet is already sufficiently powerful for moving data, so every actions on the internet is kind of seamless, right? Posting a message, sending watching a TikTok video, YouTube video, you name it, streaming video, streaming games, except when you are transferring doing with anything that has value. Yeah. So asset transfer is nothing like data transfer, put it that way. So the Libra vision, was, kind of filling that gap for money, payments, right? They want to make payments as seamless for everyone in the world. And that is a great, great vision. We kind of just like at Mysten want to generalize it, right? We view, here's an opportunity to completely address the gap, the internet infrastructure gap, to make it possible to add this layer for any developer, anyone to be able to create a digital version of an asset, right? That asset could have a backing in a real world asset, could be a native digital asset. Once you have an asset living on this sort of, kind of one way you're looking at it is open, shared, authenticated database for the world, right? Once you have that, then you imagine the possibility of, kind of blurring the boundary between different products, right? All these assets can be composed. When there's an asset, people are going to utilize them. They're going to trade them. They're going to swap them. They're going to create synthetic version. Then they're going to do all the amazing things, right? You add a programmability, right? You get smart contract. Now you start thinking about how this impact products in a very, very fundamental way, where you can now eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies, right? A lot of middlemen that provide trust, right? Custody of assets. Mm-hmm. You can eliminate them and replace them with programs. So that's where we came from, right? That's the mindset going from Libra to what Mysten want to do. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of a continuation of what we were trying to do, but we're making it even more generalized, bigger. We're thinking bigger. So for us, right, it's that excites us, right? That mission excites us. And we already feel like we got a few things figured out. So I'll say it definitely took us a while to like really, really figure out exactly what we're going to build. But the vision has always been there. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't say it's completely a seamless transition from, being part of a ginormous company to doing our own startup. But just feel like we never lost a step, right? As soon as we came out, we know exactly what we're going after. Took us a while to figure out what we're going to build and how we're going to build it, and building out the team and everything else is just kind of, it's been a pretty exciting few months.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think the interesting about that problem and that vision is for that to really work, it needs to be able to handle the world's needs globally. Like you imagine at Facebook, you're really used to building systems that cater for billions of people. And our view is all infrastructure that exists in Web3 today, all layer 1s or layer 2s, can barely even handle thousands of users concurrently.
Yeah.
So if you want to bring it to the mass market, you imagine people doing digital commerce online, people doing payments online, with people doing anything related to any kind of finance or even any type of gaming.
Yeah.
You're talking about billions of people doing interactions on a regular basis. And I think the principle around solving the infrastructure problem at the core enabling experiences for gaming to be augmented by ownership, digital commerce to be done in a way without trusted central counterparties. We think that needed a new, fresh kind of approach to solving the infrastructure problem, which is what really got us excited. And as Evan mentioned, it took us a while to figure out how that could work, but it really took us going back to first principles to sort it, rather than thinking about what's already been done and solving it exactly the same way everyone else is solving it.
I think the first step was to understand what are the requirements, the criteria from the product point of view, right? So I feel like a lot of, the last few years, what we're seeing a lot is solving technical problems, but perhaps not as much of trying to sort of bridge the gap between the real world product needs,
correct,
first, and the infrastructure.
Yeah.
A lot of these blockchains, in my opinion, are trying to fight physics. There's like,
what are you talking about? A lot of them claim to have a sub-second, finality. They have all solved physics, the sphere line problem.
I mean, I don't know just how you're going to have like 100 million users on Raspberry Pis or a commercial laptop. Yeah. All that compute or data propagation, storage, it has to happen somewhere. So I appreciate now that more people are coming into the space and trying to solve this at something that like has like a very realistic shot of actually onboarding hundreds of millions of users. Because if it kind of stays niche, I think it's interesting, but I don't know, it's not that cool if only a couple 100,000 people are actually interacting with these things. If we can get hundreds of millions or billions of people using it, that's where it becomes interesting.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if you have a platform that's focused on, you want to have assets that everybody can have access to, but then if the bandwidth of that network has some theoretical limit, then really it becomes a fee market, right, for only the highest paying apps, right, which is what we get in DeFi, right? Like DeFi can power most blockchains because it's the gamblers that are going to essentially be trading on it, right? So no one cares about $60 fees. You're going to make a couple of $1,000s. But for an NFT that costs $2, it's not going to happen.
Exactly. No. Yeah, it's kind of been fascinating to watch the transition of of how blockchains are going. I think I was talking with Anatoly this morning, but I was saying we kind of need a new name for like monolithic architecture, because I think the word is kind of frowned upon in the industry.
I think people are misusing the word architecture here, right? So if you think about it, right, if you're building a product, a blockchain, a developer platform that is one product, you can see that as monolithic. But if the chain is designed correctly, the architecture could allow you to swap out components, right? So you can say it's a monolithic chain, but it doesn't equate to monolithic architecture. And that is the principle we design Three upon, right? A lot of these things we talk about are core building blocks that can be used by other blockchain, right? Or they can be swapped out, replaced with something better.
I think that's a perfect jumping off point. Maybe to on a very high level kind of talk about the key innovations that have enabled Sui and Mysten Labs to ultimately begin to onboard these 100 million of users, and how that differs. Maybe I think a lot of people are still kind of not stuck, but have the point of view that Ethereum will continue to be the dominant blockchain, and just maybe how that compares to some of these chains that have come before it.
Let me start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me start on this, right? So taking a step back, right? Just kind of continue the conversation we had earlier was on the requirements, right? So I'm not going to go into all the, right? Just going to point out two, right? One thing we already touched upon. What are the things the product builder needs, right? They have two, if they are selecting an infrastructure provider for their products, they want to know ahead of time. They don't want to have predictability of the cost, right? Same as any cloud service provider. I want to know how much we pay. And one, two is, well, what if my application, my product is getting bigger, keep on growing? Can you keep up with me? Sure. Right? Because the last thing they want is like, okay, this is working well, and I hit a wall because the infrastructure is limiting me, right? So let's look at what that means, right? So that means predictability. Whenever you have a blockchain with a fixed capacity and you have this fee basically is, driven up by demand, you have this problem. You have no control of the cost, right? Because something else can be happening on chain. All of a sudden, your fee goes through the roof. Yeah. That is a non-starter. The other approach will be keeping the fee artificially low. But guess what? You're just going to be a perfect candidate to be attacked by bots and whatnot, right? And just keep on flooding it because there's no penalty to flooding the network. So neither approach really work, right? But if you take a step back, so how does the rest of the world, the existing large-scale application deal with this, right? The Facebook, the Instagram, the TikToks, the Snapchat, everything in the world, how do they do? Well, they have a way to meet the demand, the spikiness demand on the fly, right? It's literally as simple as like, well, our, data center is just going to be ready to make available more resource, more supply to meet demand, right? So you need to have that level of flexibility to be able to handle the immediate kind of demand increase. Not like we have the roadmap to increase capacity down the road. That doesn't really address the needs, right? Because if you look at history, like what you want to do is you want to make infrastructure to be as limited as possible, and because product is going to eat it up, right? Yes. Whatever you have is going to be eat it up, right? You want to think it's about commodity, and you want to pump out as much commodity you can. So we thought about this. We designed architecture allow horizontal scaling. So why is horizontal scaling important? Well, this is what we do is what we call intra-validators, sharding, right? Essentially, you can just add additional resource at each validator level that meet the demand on the fly, right? So that is what we believe one of the biggest, most important criteria to meet, right? So because the demand is spiky, right? It's not about meeting the average. It's about meeting that spiky demand and for the system to continue to work the same way, for the fee not to be disturbed by that. But to allow for horizontal scaling, this typical blockchain architecture, what we call front-line blocking architecture, would not work. So let me describe this, right? If you think about the stage of most of the blockchains, how they process transaction is consensus, right? Total ordering all the transactions in a block, even though most of them have nothing to do with each other. And you wait for everything to be done to go move on the next stage. Execution, you wait for all the execution, all the instruction to be executed first. You collect all the effects of the instruction execution, and then you update your Merkle tree, create a block, right? Again, stop. Wait for everything to be done, move on. Wait for everything to be on, move on, right? If you ask a lot of distributed system experts, they will just like, look at this. This doesn't feel quite right. Something is not a way to efficiently use a resource and not the way.
Ideally, you want no stoppage.
Yeah, you want to be continuous, right? So the analogy here is like a train, except at the stop, nobody get off, right? The train, wait for everybody to get on, move on next step, move on next step, right? Because everybody's going to the same destination, right? All your transactions going to the same destination because all the effects are being captured in one ginormous data structure, the Merkle tree, right? So that means you are keeping everything, kind of processing a group of transactions at a time, right? That really limit your scalability. Our approach is, because we are data model, right? This is one thing nobody's really have kind of figured out. The magic of Sui is not one thing. It's not just because we have better consensus algorithm is now we're doing something interesting in terms of, snapshotting. It's a data model. Okay, so while we're kind of transitioning into a data object store model, right? So every asset is an object. Okay, then because now the transaction are targeting specific object, right? If you're an NFT, you send in transaction to modify it. If some kind of current coin that has a balance, you send in transaction to update them. Or you have a smart contract, multiple accounts can send transaction targeting the same smart contract for minting NFT, for auctions, whatever, right? So you have transactions naturally grouped based on the object they're targeting. So you can imagine sort of almost like the analogy is here, rather than having one train taking everybody to the same place. Yeah, as many groups you have of transactions related to each other, just pull up cars. Right? As many cars you need, just take them to where they need to go.
And is that the parallel processing execution?
This is parallel. There is parallel everything, the entire pipeline, right? So, even if you think about this way, right? Let's say you have multiple groups of transactions, each of them can be processed independently in parallel. So each of the validator, if you increase resources or increase workers, they can independently process the groups of transactions.
Gotcha. And is the increased workers multiple cores?
Yeah, it can be multiple cores, it can be multiple machines. We'll roll this out where you're going to see perhaps some of the machines will be specialized, right? They handle signature aggregation, but then you're going to have generic workers that just kind of give you the bandwidth, right? Because you process more things at the same time, right? We'll roll this out over time, but the architecture is what's important here because this model allows to scale horizontally, right? Because now you can provision for any kind of spike.
And I'm super excited to get more into. I'm going to ask Sam a bunch of questions, but I'm super excited because I think today the more traditional approach has been like sharding or subnets or Cosmos zones. So I appreciate the fact that Sui is doing it all in kind of a single state machine. I think that unlock is really the key driver.
We're seeing how difficult it is for developer to get a smart contract right. If you're adding complexity, now they have to think about different shards. Yes. Most people can even write any kind of concurrent programs correctly. Let's just be honest with that. This is going to be this is the choice we took, right? This is the design because we want for the developer not to worry about this, right? From that point of view, this is a network that have, unlimited capacity.
Yeah.
Right. If you increase the capacity, increase the demand, the capacity will increase with it.
I think that one thing to say is now you've built a blockchain that on typical blockchains, the block space is like a finite resource. It's like a rare commodity, right? That everyone's bidding for. In Sui, it's an infinite commodity. Like anyone can use it and you can buy it for cheap. That needs to be pegged with a really good tokenomics design or an economics model. Our economics model is designed with the infrastructure from day one to incentivize validators to increase the capacity of the network. And also to penalize validators that overcharge on fees. So you're encourages validators to charge closer to your cost as much as possible to earn the right form of rewards. And as you add more capacity to the network, you can process more transactions, increasing your profit, right? So those two things have to be tied together. One, you've got a world where you can add more resources infinitely as long as demand is there. But also you can't hold the network to ransom by just simply keeping a single machine when the network maybe needs three, right? So
it's a healthy kind of a sort of drive towards the bottom, right? It's like it's healthy because the validator will make more money as the cost goes down, demand increases until we reach some kind of equilibrium, right? It's also healthy for the builders, like because they don't need to worry about, oh my god, I'm working with something that's limited. Right? We believe by making the infrastructure boundless, it's going to unlock creativity.
100%. And I think to me, the saddest state of the market today is the fact that if you were an engineer and you're excited about this, but you build on the wrong chain that does not have the possibility of scaling, or the scaling is very limited, you're kind of dead on the water from like, even if you build the most interesting application that does not have the possibility to scale, you're just very limited. And so I appreciate the fact that the protocols that are actually abstracting the complexions and taking that in-house, so the application engineers don't have to focus on that and can only focus on building scalable applications that have good design, good user experience, and things that like people actually want to use. I think that is the correct way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about lambdas, right, on Amazon or microservices on Google, today I can write one, I throw it on Google or Amazon, and AWS takes care of the scalability for me. I don't have to worry about that. You'll throw a machine, more capacity, and it just works, and there's a fee. And the fee doesn't go up 10x because someone else just runs a bot. That, like this noisy neighbor problem, right? Oh, sorry, your fee's gone up 100x because someone else has run an app that's taken all that capacity. That sense of freedom that developers have to play is what we want to afford people with Sui.
Yeah, and this object-centric model has other benefits, right? Just talking about fee for a second, right? If you have a smart contract that's super popular, it's hot, everybody want to make an NFT or whatever. Okay, you can increase the price, but it's going to be localized, right? It's basically all the transaction targeting that object. It's very, very easy to have a localized fee market, right? Without disturbing the global market.
So the vast majority of transactions will most likely be parallelized, but if there's a single contract that does get potted or just has increased traffic, that is isolated to the specific state.
Yeah, correct. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that should be a requirement for all blockchains.
Yes, we think so too.
I know Solana's moving that way as well. I really wish other blockchains would do this. I think you have to have the parallel processing to be able to isolate those.
Yeah, the object model is what made this really, really easy to do versus other blockchains, right? Because otherwise, how do you work this out? How does it work? If everything goes through consensus mixed with transaction targeting this asset, transaction targeting this asset, the decision, by the validators become different, right? Because this is a hard thing, therefore the fee should be increased, but this is not hard. How do we pick which ones to include in the, right? It gets complicated. As opposed, right, if you're doing a consensus on a group of transaction, they are all targeting the same objects, right? So so exactly what's going on, right? Why is the fees increased? It was because of the smart contracts.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and I really want everybody to move away from the global fee markets. There is no reason that an NFT mint or whatever you're doing should drive fees up for the entire chain. So that's amazing that you guys are doing the isolated hotspots.
In Bitcoin, it makes sense, right?
It's
one asset.
It's not doing too much. It just has to exist. So they're just transferring it from one person to another, I guess. But yeah, awesome. So starting off and kind of bootstrapping the system, are the nodes going to be relatively small, or are they going to be like more beefier nodes?
I think we've released what the node specifications will be. The goal is that when you start with the network, it can process some amount of transactions that we'll set as a bar for the network. And then as the network needs more, as a throughput demand increases, validators can just add more. Right. So unlike other networks where all you do is you beef up the CPU and you can't go wider, you can only go up, you can only do vertical scaling. That only gets you so far. Whereas with Sui, you can do both vertical and horizontal scaling. So you can have really fast CPUs, but then more importantly, as you add more, you really increase the capacity of the network.
The TLDR is a system designed to, it's more efficient to have several of the, probably not the most beefy machines.
Yes.
Horizontal scaling is much more efficient than trying to get the fastest possible machine. Although the competitive nature of the market will see, right? Some people will probably want to, set up a node that just responds faster than other, right? Exploring.
But ultimately, the more transactions you can process and the more you can meet the demand, the more fees you earn as a validator. So it creates a real healthy ecosystem where validators are encouraged to earn more and rewarded accordingly for processing faster, processing more transactions in the network.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And are each node's going to have kind of like high throughput requirements from a bandwidth standpoint?
It's a decentralized network, so people will provide a guidance on what we think the specification should be. But once the network is live, people can do whatever they want, right? But ultimately, the economics of the network is designed in such a way where you're penalized if you fall behind, right? So people would just stop staking with you if you're a poor validator. That's just the reality of it.
Yes.
Very cool. No, I'm super excited. I think this is the direction the space needs to move. And it's kind of saddened me that it's taken this long to ultimately move this direction, but I'm extremely excited you guys are building this. And I'm very excited that for the possibility of hundreds of millions, billions of users.
And look, we almost didn't get there, right? Like when we left Facebook, one of the things was continue with the Libra project and maybe perhaps launch with that. But I think we knew what Libra was designed for, ultimately what the restrictions and limitations were. And I think that having that knowledge allowed us to take a step back and really have a different approach to how you build a chain. And that's why we're doing the hard work here.
Yeah, amazing. And I think I saw on one of the previous podcasts that you did, I think Adeniyi was, correct me if I'm wrong, was doing like 500 TPS or about.
Yeah, I mean, I think Diem can be more than that, right? But ultimately, we'll see where the limit is right? This is, again, this is the general architecture, right? A frontline blocking, we think there's going to hit a limit at some point in time. It's not like if you have a faster consensus, it's going to be sufficient or faster execution. It's all the entire system working together. I think some of the blockchains are trying to pipeline a few stages. So in going the right direction, we just decide, we want to build in that possibility of scaling at a much different, much more fundamentally different way than all the other blocks.
Gotcha. And the main thing from like the time at Facebook and Libra and Diem was moving from that type of current architecture that was ultimately open source to the object oriented. And that's kind of been the key innovation at SWE and Mysten Labs that unlocked the parallelization and also the horizontal scaling for billions of users.
And there's other benefits here. So for one, right, the state are captured in the objects, right? So there's two benefits here, right? One is we can treat the Merkle tree update, the block, as sort of ancillary data structure. That's the result of snapshotting. Every few minutes or some periodic we do snapshot create a blocks. While in the processing, you don't need to, right? Because the object themselves are stateful. You can capture the state changes in the objects right away. This is also powerful from a read perspective. Right now, to extract any kind of information out of the blockchain is pretty painful. You kind of have to find the block. You have to go through the history, find the exact, you have to traverse the tree or have some indexing to give you the information. Here, if you are building a large-scale application, you see with these assets object, what we do is something called sparse replay. You literally just follow the revision of those objects, how they transition, right? So these are think about it from a product point of view. These are the assets I care about. I can just follow their history rather than worry about the entire chain, right? So you still have the blockchain, right? All the information there for auditability, for the history. That's really, really important property. But for a lot of applications, you don't need to do that.
And I think also we probably miss the fact that you actually have a lot more available storage. So it's not only scalable from a throughput perspective, you also have horizontal scalable storage. You can add more storage as you add more nodes to the network, and that storage is actually usable for storing data. It's not going to be just storing Merkle DAGs that are...
Yeah, that's the thing, right? We're not Merkleizing all the data you store on chain because they're inside the objects, right? So an object can be anything you define to be. So the storage part, you're still paying for replication, right? Because this is our blockchain after all, right? A lot of different nodes have to store the data stored on chain, but now it's scalable. Versus if you Merkleize all the data, it's extremely expensive, right? The overhead is way too much.
I'm extremely excited for you guys to ultimately go live and to see all the different applications that builders ultimately build. Now that you've kind of continued to build out the prototypes, is the testnet live?
Tesla is going to be going live this September.
Okay, excellent. And what are your kind of just because of the object model of the blockchain, do you think it will be very good for all type of applications, or are you trying to target specific applications?
So think about, so because of object-oriented nature of the data model, this also impact our, sort of programming model as well. So, other blockchains are like this, right? So EVM chain, so you basically the smart contract stateful. You have basically record keeping inside the smart contract. While everybody talk about composability, it's actually really hard to compose across different protocols, right? Because your data are trapped inside the smart contract, and each of them has to reinterpret the data. Basically, you don't even have a shared type. So Move changed that to having a shared type understood by a lot of different smart contracts potentially. We take a step even further because now everything is an object. So the smart contracts model, rather than loading data from address, doing processing computation on them and writing it back, we're just saying you will have assets as inputs into a smart contract. You have object as output, you can chain them much easily.
Yeah.
And the other thing is on the asset level, you're now able to compose object of different types.
Mm-hmm.
So in gaming, I think about RPG game, you have a hero, define a type, right? A name, race, experience and level and all that good stuff. Another object can be just a magic sword, completely different, types. They can be composed together into one object. So we believe this opens up all kinds of possibility. Definitely in gaming, right? We're seeing some real exciting things happening in the gaming side. But this opens up a lot of other things. Everything in commerce and in some of the finance usage cases as well.
I'm a major fan of composability. I feel like we haven't really even scratched the surface on what composability ultimately unlocks. And anything, in my point of view, that allows applications or objects to compose easier is extremely beneficial.
And in reality, right, anyone coming from a traditional programming language that understands OO concepts, we feel can really pick up Sweep relatively quickly, right? Like the ability you can throw an object as an argument within a smart contract and have the safety of that object guaranteed by the runtime. This is stuff that you'd expect to be able to do in another language. I think that's the power that we're bringing. Yeah, it also makes it easy to build marketplaces and things like that, right? You don't have to set these random standards to get people to understand what's actually happening. The type system, strongly typed system actually helps along.
And is that a specific kind of SWE specific technology, or was that also kind of with the Move programming language?
I think a lot of this is specific to SWE. We actually Sam wrote a blog post about why we create a different variance Move for this reason, to take advantage of the object-oriented architecture. Right. For example, the thing we talk about composing objects of different types together, it's not possible with traditional Move or any other blockchains today.
Awesome. I think it's super interesting. And then I just kind of want to re-articulate kind of the main highlights for everybody to understand, because I think everybody's very much kind of in line with ETH and like the EVM and layer 2s. And I think this just kind of completely breaks down a lot of those assumptions. Being able to go to the object-oriented, not having block space be finite, kind of being able to scale indefinitely with additional hardware vertically and horizontally by the workers. And then being able to compose, and then not having to worry about like the protocol itself, and just being able to focus on the applications.
That's a good summary.
Yeah.
So I think, going to get into a lot more of the technical stuff with Sam later on. But yeah, I'm curious more, it's a general purpose blockchain. And ultimately mention games, but are there anything others like applications that you're excited about, or like engineers, maybe like stepping back. One of the hard parts about starting a new blockchain is kind of like that engineering onboarding. What is kind of like the go-to market or enticing or words of wisdoms that you would say to engineers that are looking or interested to build on Sui?
Yeah, I mean, I could touch on a lot, right? I think the first one's on like GTM. I think in terms of our interest, right, Sui is not just for gaming; it's a general purpose blockchain. We're going to have games being built on Sui. We're going to have DeFi protocols being built on Sui, including Central Limit Order Book, a club as it's called. We're also going to have applications from the digital commerce space as well. So commerce, gaming, and finance, those are the three areas that are main pillars we're focusing and indexing on. So people building DeFi protocols already, it's already happening. I think at mainnet we'll have, of course, stable coins, DeFi protocols, games, commerce, all those applications. What we're really excited about is how those three worlds work together, how you start to have them all fill in, like a loop of experiences that you just might not do elsewhere because of composability affords you. I think Sam would be a good person to even talk about like the developer onboarding because he has a lot of great ideas there. But we feel that the amount of content we've been pushing out to make it easy for developers to understand Sui Move and to get up and running with examples and even our tutorials is a great way to do that. We've seen a lot of interest of people who are looking at traditional Move, but once they realize about Sui Move and they see how much easier it is and the concept is much easier to understand, they really get hooked very quickly as well. So I think apart from the traditional apps people are building, we think there'll be new experiences that will be augmented by Sui that we don't even know of yet, that really excite us. But I think it's the imagination of those three worlds together, right? That's going to be super exciting.
I mean, ultimately, what we care about, we believe, we've been through a few kind of crypto cycles, right? And I think, at least I believe this cycle, we want to see some real consumer adoption, real mainstream adoption that kind of, like force us to think about a lot of the product level problems, right? So ultimately the technology serve products and products serve consumers. That's what we're focusing a lot of energies on. So we're working with a lot of the crypto native developers because they are the ones that create the brilliant, interesting new protocols and new building block that can be incorporated into products. But at the same time, we want to bring on real, kind of big product builders. They're being on the outside looking in and say, hey, how can we adopt this is cool new technology, right? Our job as a platform is to bring the two worlds together in a lot of ways and abstract away a lot of complexity. Because there's a lot of hesitation on both sides, right? And I think one of the challenge for the builders, as you say, what's the recommendation? What are some words of wisdom for developer, especially for people who are thinking about starting in the space, right? Think about who your audience are, right? Are you building for just a few thousands or tens of thousands DJs? Are you building for the mass market? Right? And because those are completely different audience. And if you're building for the mass market, it doesn't make sense for you to focus a lot of your energy on, sort of like, a lot of the play around the tokenomics, the growth, which are probably not actually setting your protocol up well for adoption, right? So these things kind of come to conflict, right? So that's very important question for every builder. We love to work with them, right? We're working with a lot of very ambitious builders. People want to have a real impact, right? We love to work with them. These are the things that we're here to help them with.
And I think even with the builders we've been talking to, it's always the question of what problems are you trying to solve? And then start working back from there because especially if they're trying to port an app from Solidity or port an app from, even the Solana space, like it's really getting to rethink, like, look, you can go and build something that can impact millions of users. So if you imagine, most of them have built apps with a lot of restrictions that don't allow them to target mass market. Well, they're not creative or smart enough to figure that out. But like, there's really a limit on price, cost, like everything else, that forces them to maybe go down a particular application domain. Whereas with Sui, we want them to think that's why we call it Sui, right? In terms of boundless. We want them to think from a boundless perspective and re-engineer from what problem do I solve and how do I address a bigger market? And those are the people working.
That's awesome. It's much needed. I've talked with a lot of people, and I'd say the at least common thought when I speak with them is that like the EVM kind of has like dominant network effect. But when I look at like Google or Facebook or Meta, ultimately the amount of engineers they have and the amount of people that are developing on like Solidity, like or the EVM is very tiny. So I think it's an awesome approach to kind of at least give out a lending hand to these people that are already building into these ecosystems and already familiar, but with the point of view that they can build applications that can actually scale to hundreds of millions or millions of people. And then ultimately continuing to entice those that haven't left kind of the traditional Silicon Valley jobs and come join the dark side.
Yeah, we're hoping the next wave of the bull cycle will have new types of applications that actually grow significantly the people in the crypto space.
Right. Hopefully there will be no cycle. This is just another fabric of the internet. Right. I mean, this is the internet infrastructure. You just use it when you see fit. Right. So that's ultimately when the industry is successful, that's how they think about it. Right. People shouldn't be building just because it's a bull market.
I fully agree. Yeah, I hope we get to the point ultimately where we don't have to talk about specific L1s per se, or L2s, or just blockchains, and it's kind of similar to TCP/IP, and people just use it and they don't know.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Like you don't say, I can't play your game because it's not on AWS.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that means if you think about the product you're building, like how do you provide that kind of seamless experience, right? Today, if I want to play a Web3 game, I need to have a wallet. I need to have some tokens to pay for gas. I probably have to get on a Discord to watch out for the NFT drop and whitelisting everything. I think that's an interesting experiment. Right? I think that having the ownership augment in game is powerful, but also create a lot of friction. In terms of onboarding consumers, right? It's probably not exactly the right way to do it. That's what we think about a lot about working with our partners. Like, hey, how does a free-to-play game translate to this model, right? When is the right time to sort of introduce these concepts? Right. How do you have the product pay the cost for the user to get them onboarded first, right? So these are the things that's required to get us to the next iteration.
Yeah, I totally agree. Looking forward to that day. Ultimately, cool. No, I think we've kind of touched upon a lot of like the high level topics and encapsulation, high level tech. No, I'm generally very excited for what you guys are building. I think it is definitely the direction that we need to head to onboard all these users. Do you feel like there is any like remaining kind of bottlenecks either from the technology side or just like user adoption or developer adoption that you'll have to overcome in the coming months?
I mean, I think the technology is always going to be improving, right? We're setting up an architecture of the blockchain to enable all this. We have a lot of work ahead of us to get there. Working really hard. The team is working really hard towards it. It's less of a concern, just something we need to get done. In terms of adoption, I think just, part of it is on us to be able to educate better. I think most of the people who are now aware of Suite don't really understand the distinction. Right, doesn't really understand the big picture. The magic sauce is about the data model and everything. So, kind of evolves around that. We need to do a better job educating people. But ultimately, I think the only way a platform can be established is to have something that attracts users.
Correct.
Right, and then we want to tell our stories to our partners. So we're working with a lot of partners. They have something really exciting to bring on board. That will be the best storyteller for us. That will sort of get this going. The exciting things about Web3 is everything is open source, right? So, which means while the initial, kind of getting things established can be a little bit slow, right? Because people are wrapping their heads around a new architecture, new kind of technology. They're going to be onboarded, trying new things. But the next wave, people are just going to say, this is being done. This is successful. I'm just going to go use it. right? You're going to see the flywheel just going to spin faster and faster. We want to get there, right? We are literally in the process, like getting the cranking, getting the flywheel going now. But once it's going, it go really fast. That's what
I think also from September onwards, we're going to start releasing a lot more progress with our partners, progress with investors, progress on things that can be done on Sui, that can be exemplified, that we just don't think can be done anywhere else. It's going to be a new kind of, we think, kind of renaissance in thought on how people think of what could be built without the previous restrictions. And I think the onus is on us is to educate the market as to what those are and what those could look like, either through our partners or through examples and sometimes we built ourselves. So that's work we have cut out for us.
I totally agree. I think education is definitely can be a challenge, but I think you guys are definitely on the right path, technology wise, and really appreciate you doing the podcast and kind of doing some of these long form, because it is, I think a lot of us, it's so early now that a lot of the communication or kind of word spreads from Twitter.
Yes.
And so I don't think Twitter is always in their 280 character limit or whatever it is, 240, the best way to disseminate information. Sometimes memes work pretty well, but
up for memes.
But yeah, no, I really do appreciate it, and I think it's super helpful. Ultimately, maybe to kind of wrap it up a little bit, I think it's a little bit easier for maybe some of the guests or listeners to follow along is like comparing and contrasting Sui to other blockchains that maybe they're formula or more familiar with. Why did you not take like the sharding approach or layer 2 approach or the application specific approach? Why do this kind of single architecture or monolithic?
Well, for one, I think we're solving not just one problem. I think there's, in our opinion, there's too much focus on just solving one problem at a time and somehow have all these different solutions that come together. Right. That's what you're seeing today with roll-up, speed availability. We want the holistic experience just to be better. Right. The things we talk about. Yes, we're solving the scalability problem. We're also solving some of the sort of storage problem, right? That's something that's very limiting. For example, like NFT today is not really that useful because you can't really put anything on chain. They're static, right? So storage is a big part of concern because it's so high cost, right? So that's very limiting. We're fixing a lot of the developer experience, right? We want this model where you can take your Web2 product schema and translate directly to our blockchain, right? This is the type. This is how we represent an asset. Why couldn't we do that? The same thing on a blockchain. So it's not solving one thing. It's solving everything. So if you are building components separately, it's hard to design a system that leverage all. Right. So like I say, we are building a Sui architecture allow us to, in the future, swap out components. If we make an improvement to consensus, we can swap it out. Can potentially have different execution layers. Can have different even, program language, source level program language that target and move IR. There's a lot of things we can do. They are, they're components. They can be replaced, but we believe in presenting the best possible product for developers, right? This is infrastructure for developers. They are our primary customer. We want them to have all the tools they have, the best of the best, right? This is why we take the approach rather than addressing one problem at a time. Obviously, we'll be watching to learn from other, right? People come up with great ideas. We'll think about then whether they can be adapted to improve on our product.
If I had to summarize this, what I haven't said, look, we really took a product-driven approach to building this from scratch. We assessed the market. We assessed what we'd even done with Libra and figured out I have to address 2 billion, 3 billion people. We need to take a different approach to that. And that's what, coming in with a set of fresh eyes and having executed in the space previously was what was really refreshing and helpful. That's not to say other teams haven't taken product-driven approaches, but we've failed to see any kind of improvement over the last 8 years of what people have been building. It's all really like a derivative of what's been done before.
Yeah.
And that's
I fully agree. Yeah, I think it's kind of hodgepodging a lot of things together to try to scale, but there's a lot of drawbacks in the other blockchains, architectures, and their approach. And definitely from the product standpoint, if you're trying to bridge from an L1 or L2 to an L2 to an L2, it just gets complicated.
There'll be L3 soon.
And then the L3 and the L4. Yeah, I appreciate, I mean, there's a lot of complexity behind the scenes in the software, but I appreciate as simple as possible from the user experience, and very much appreciate that product-driven mindset. It definitely has to be kind of the Web 2-like experience that the vast majority of billions of people are used to.
I mean, that's why software uses layers. The layers should be sort of hiding a lot of complexity, right? So that's the approach we're taking. We're hiding a lot of complexity from the developers, so they don't have to worry about sharding, right? For example, if they go sharding, they have to either the system somehow figure out some magic, automatically pull the data together onto one shard for them, or they have to program for it, which is I would not trust most of the developer want to deal with that.
People struggle with basic atomic swaps. I don't know how they're going to now force them to now deal with sharding and all these other concepts.
These things, right? So we move sharding to the implementation details for the value.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you again, gentlemen. One last thing. I think one of the critiques of like Solana, and I'm curious, you guys may experience this as well. If you actually increase, like, say, the hardware, how in your opinion, does that affect decentralization for the network overall? Again, like I think there's no way around, like, personally actually increasing hardware because you can't fight the physics. But I think that is still like a kind of contrarian point of view at this point in time in the market. What is your thoughts on like decentralization and kind of more holistically like increasing hardware?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, what is decentralization, right? So it's almost like a society, right? A lot of people want to make sure a lot of people, including normal people, have stakes in the network, ownership in the network. They sort of vote through their representative, right? If you think about a validator, their representative. So if you increase the number of validators, you will pay a cost somewhere in terms of performance, latency in some way, even for any chains out there. So it's all about a balance, right? We're not maximalists. We're not like saying, it's like we want to have maximum number of validators, whatnot, everyone then will run small machines. Guess what? Your system is simply not going to scale, right? So I think the key here is to have a healthy market dynamics, to make sure the validators can compete fairly. They offer better services, or better yields, they can attract people, kind of basically staking their tokens, and for it to not be locked in. That's very important. If they can vote with their feet, just like a democracy, right? They can move to whatever that represents their view. So that's the key thing here. I think all these networks, POS, the whole entire industry is going to have to kind of learn about this and figure out what the right kind of incentive models and governance model is going to work out. To over time, you want to make sure you don't have sort of like over concentration of power.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, right? Look, ultimately, the dream that a guy in his bedroom is going to run nodes used to be the thing for Ethereum back in the days, and that's quickly changed. I think the same thing for Web3 as a whole. Like, I just think the idea that every individual can run a node to validate the network is not really, like, you're going to be dishonest if you paint that picture. I mean, it would be a great utopian world if that were possible, but what you can do is ensure you have infrastructure that can scale to have as many representatives as as possible.
And the other thing is there will be other actors in the ecosystem that play a role.
Correct.
Right. That's why everybody's looking at like clients, right? In the old days, you have different clients that provide some kind of a, sort of like ensuring bad actors, right? Like everybody's behaving well, right? So there's going to be other other players in the ecosystem, that's something we will, kind of also figure out over time, right? Just in terms of number of validators, that's too often there's a number being played around, right? People really should think about what is trade-off. The community will decide what is the right set of trade-off in terms of degree of decentralization, and what does the decentralization means versus the performance, what they want to see.
One thing to throw in as a bit of a side comment, right, is like with Sui, because you have validators that can add more resources, there's in a world where validators might decide to perhaps shard that to other participants themselves, but that's something we've touched on internally. Like me as a validator, maybe I have a core, maybe 5 other people on cores on my behalf, and you can have your own incentive model. That's completely separate from a network, right? So that intra-validator sharding element can give you a different type of design they traditionally just don't have in other chains. But again, like you start to become slower than everyone else, right? Like all of validators will be faster than you are. So there's an element of the economics that needs to really work as part of the whole process.
Yeah, I think it's funny. If you look at the behind the numbers on Ethereum, I believe it's like over 70% of the nodes are run on like some type of hosted service.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I mean, I think Ethereum generally does this fairly well.
Yeah.
I think better than Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have a few minor that like basically like own most of
the pool.
Most of the hash power. But even that, you have to look at where are the 2/3 majority come from. Who have the 2/3 staking, voting power, essentially, right? Those are the most important nodes. So I think this is far from solved.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again. It's been wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure everybody else will. Any parting or closing thoughts? Anything that we didn't touch upon that you want to touch upon?
I mean, I think this is just a general comment, right? I think everybody should think about how technology evolves over our lives. There's too often in this space, the people just assume what currently is there is going to be how things evolve over time, right? Technology always leaps. When there's a significant change, that usually kind of means, something, you're going to see different kind of experience, consumer experience that come out of it, right? That's what we want to bring on. Just want to make sure, encourage everyone to sort of like be open-minded about a different paradigm, different concept, right? It's definitely going to look very, very different 5-10 years from now, right? If we are successful, it's good for the entire industry, right? Definitely. We challenge the current assumptions. We'd like to see everybody. We want to see the entire pie expands, right? We're not in the business of saying like we want to capture all the smaller, the existing pie and capture most of it. What we want is expanding the pie.
Yeah, I mean the pie today is relatively small, right? Like so you can't go into business trying to build on that premise alone, which is why I hope the next set of applications bring in more users into the space. But I think, look, drawing the parallels with broadband and dial-up, I think the dial-up world is what we have today, and our goal is to bring broadband to Web3. Not to say we're the only people that do it, but like we want to make a big balance.
And we totally expect there will be new competitors that emerges. They'll keep us honest. We want to be challenged. First we have to prove ourselves, right? Exactly. And then we love to have competition that spurs us forward.
Awesome. No, I love that analogy, and also the kind of number of iterations. It's normally you have to go through the series of iterations and completely new architectures, kind of relearning from the past. But the series of iterations is ultimately kind of what gets you to that final product. And then another way that I've been describing blockchains and kind of the transitions is exactly the dial-up to broadband to like fiber optics.
Correct.
And so it's funny that you mentioned that, but. Awesome. Thank you again, gentlemen. It was an absolute pleasure. I really do appreciate your time, and hope everybody enjoys the conversation as much as I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time.